Have you ever seen a little child notice something that all the adults ignored? What happens when a little girl spots a stranger who looks hungry and decides to give away her own lunch? What started as a small act of kindness turned into a story none of them could ever forget. Stay with me, because what happens next will surprise you in ways you won't expect. And before we begin, if you enjoy stories that touch the heart, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, you won't miss the next emotional journey we share with you here. He was halfway through saying, "One bite, then we'll head back," when his daughter went quiet in that way that meant her heart had noticed something before he had. Daniel Weber rolled sleeves, loosened tie, the kind of posture that made people think he always had a plan, followed Emma's gaze across the open-air tables to the figure near the edge of the pavement. A young woman sat with her back to a lamppost, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her ribs together. Her dress might once have been nice. Now it tried to hide the cold with thin, frayed fabric. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, she looks hungry. Can I share my food with her?" Daniel felt the automatic no-rise stranger, risk, liability, and then he saw the way Emma was already breaking her sandwich in half with careful little hands, as if refusal would be the real danger here. "We'll do it together," he said, standing. They crossed the space between the tables and the lamppost, and the woman flinched like sound itself hurt. "You're not in trouble," Daniel said, palms open, voice low, the tone he hadn't used since hospital nights and goodbye mornings. "I'm Daniel. This is Emma." Emma stepped forward, small but certain. "You can have mine," she said, offering the warm half. The woman blinked hard, a breath catching like it had edges. "Thank you," she whispered, the words shaky but crisp, as if she'd been saving it for something that mattered. "I'm Clara." Daniel crouched to her level, noticing the tremor in her fingers and the pale crack in her lip. "Can I get you soup? Water?" She nodded once, almost apologetic, like yes was an admission. He moved fast, returned faster. A bottle, a steaming cup, an extra sandwich, napkins no one ever thought to offer. When the soup met her hands, she held it like a small son. Clara tried to swallow without making a sound and failed. The soft groan of hunger slipped out, and she stiffened in embarrassment. Emma sat beside her, shoulder touching gently, like she could transmit warmth by proximity. "I like drawing," Emma said, unwrapping her own now smaller sandwich. "Do you?" Clara smiled without teeth. "I used to," she said. Daniel watched the way her eyes tracked the world, the shadows of moving shoes, the glint of a stroller wheel, the puddle the wind kept denting. Not unfocused calculating exits, opportunities, dangers. He recognized the scan. He'd seen it in boardrooms right before someone decided whether to fight or fold. "Do you have somewhere safe for tonight?" he asked, knowing the answer. Her shoulder rose, fell. "I'm fine," she said, and then, softer, honest, "Not really." The wind picked up like a reminder. Emma unzipped her little hoodie and draped it over Clara's forearm. "It's okay," Emma murmured. "My dad says we look out for people." Daniel felt something old and careful inside him shift, a lock clicking. "Come with us," he said, the words surprising him with how right they sounded once said aloud. "Guest room, shower, hot meal, a door that locks from the inside." Clara shook her head on instinct. "I don't want to be a problem." He almost laughed. Problems wore suits and smiled at cameras. They did not apologize between sips of soup. "You'd be doing me a favor," he said. "My daughter makes better art when she has someone to laugh at my terrible stick figures." Emma nodded emphatically. "He's really bad." Clara looked between them, measuring, fighting that stubborn pride that keeps people upright and alone. "One night," she said at last, voice steadying. "I leave in the morning." Daniel didn't argue. He helped her up, discovered how light she was, how carefully she tried to stand without leaning on him. "We'll take it one night at a time," he said, and for the first time in a long while, he meant it about more than just a guest. The drive was quiet but not empty. Emma filled the air with small stories about a school project with too much glitter, about a song that gets stuck in heads on purpose, about the way pancakes taste better for dinner because they're misbehaving, and Clara answered in short, honest lines that made Daniel realize how many people talk in circles when they're afraid. Inside the house, the light did what light does. It softened edges. Mrs. Marta met them at the door with a dish towel over one shoulder, eyebrows lifted, mouth set to say no until she looked at Clara and changed it to a careful yes. "Towels are in the bathroom," Marta said. Extra blanket on the bed. Shoes by the door, please. Clara obeyed like rules were a gift. In the guest room, Emma hovered in the doorway. You can borrow my favorite book, she said. It has a unicorn, but a serious one. Clara's laugh sounded like a match on damp wood, small, real. Thank you, she said, and Daniel found himself wishing there were words that meant more than thank you and less than everything. Clara woke before sunrise, unsure if it was the unfamiliar softness of the bed or the silence pressing against her ears that startled her awake. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, afraid to move in case it all dissolved like a dream. The sheets smelled of lavender, the kind of scent that belongs to safe places, not sidewalks. For a moment, she allowed herself to pretend this was hers, that the blanket had always been hers, that warmth wasn't temporary. Then the sharp edge of memory returned. The street, the rain, the slammed door of someone who told her she was disposable. She sat up quickly, clutching her worn tote bag as though it might anchor her to reality. A quiet knock came before she could stand. Emma's small voice slipped through the door. Miss Clara? Breakfast is ready. The child's tone was casual, but to Clara it felt like an invitation she didn't deserve. Downstairs, the table was set in a way that almost embarrassed her: fresh bread, fruit, eggs steaming in a pan, coffee with cream swirling like a little storm in a cup. Daniel stood by the counter, sleeves rolled, tie abandoned, already looking like he'd been awake for hours. He nodded at her without pity, and that mattered. Eat, he said simply, as if hunger wasn't a crime but a responsibility. She hesitated until Emma dragged a chair out and patted it with both hands. Here, Clara sat, unsure how to hold a fork without trembling. Every bite felt like someone else's food, every sip of coffee tasted stolen. Yet neither of them looked at her like she was intruding. Emma chattered about her plans for the day school projects, stories she wanted to draw, and Clara found herself answering, surprised that she remembered how to join in. She even smiled once, catching Daniel watching with the kind of expression a man wears when he notices something quietly important. After breakfast, Clara insisted on helping with dishes, but Marta, the housekeeper, intercepted her with a towel in hand. Guests don't wash, Marta said briskly, though her eyes softened when she saw Clara's awkward persistence. Clara let go reluctantly, realizing she didn't even know how to act like a guest anymore. Instead, she wandered to the garden where Emma had run off, sketchpad tucked under her arm. The morning sun poured over rows of flowers, and Clara felt a pang of something both sweet and cruel. She crouched to help Emma gather fallen petals. Do you paint too? Emma asked suddenly, looking at her with big, curious eyes. Clara hesitated, then nodded. I used to. The girl tore a page from her pad and handed it over like a challenge. Show me. Clara laughed nervously, but her hand remembered the strokes as if it had been waiting for years. Within minutes, a soft sketch of a bird appeared on the page, delicate lines curving into feathers. Emma's gasp was loud enough to make Daniel glance up from the porch. You're amazing, Emma cried, hugging her arm. Clara lowered her gaze, cheeks warm, unprepared for praise. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel found Clara standing in the hallway, staring at the framed photographs lining the wall. Smiling faces, birthdays, vacations, all frozen fragments of a life built on steadiness. He stopped a few steps away, giving her space. That was my wife, he said quietly, pointing to a picture of a woman holding a laughing baby Emma. Clara's throat tightened, guilt mixing with sympathy. She looks kind, she whispered. Daniel's jaw worked as he nodded. She was. Silence stretched, not heavy but fragile. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. But the air between them shifted, the kind of shift that suggests both of them were carrying stories too large to tell in one breath. Clara excused herself quickly, retreating to the guest room, but sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, wondering why this man who had every reason to close his doors had opened one for her. The next day brought something Clara didn't expect: laughter. Emma insisted she join them for lunch, and when Daniel's attempt at flipping pancakes nearly set the pan smoking, Clara laughed so hard she covered her mouth. The sound startled even her, as though her own joy had snuck back in disguise. For a moment, she forgot the weight of the past weeks, forgot the shadows waiting outside the safety of these walls. But just as quickly, reality pushed back in. Her phone buzzed in her bag, the cracked screen lighting up with a name she never wanted to see again. She pressed it down, silenced it, but her chest thudded with unease. Someone from the outside still knew she existed, and she knew shadows have a way of finding open doors. The call didn't stop after she silenced it. It came again the next morning, and then again at noon, buzzing like a wasp she couldn't crush. Clara hid the phone beneath her pillow, hoping if she ignored it, the sound wouldn't seep into this new fragile peace. But Daniel noticed. He noticed the way she flinched when it vibrated, the way she pressed her lips tight and forced a smile whenever Emma asked who it was. He didn't ask right away, though. He understood the look of someone not ready to unravel. Instead, he watched carefully, as he always did, measuring risks and weighing choices. That night, while Clara pretended to read in the guest room, he stood outside her door for a moment, considering whether to knock. He didn't, but the decision not to knock haunted him almost as much as the unanswered calls haunted her. By the end of the week, Clara had started settling into rhythms, helping Emma with drawings, preparing tea with Marta, sketching in the quiet hours before bed. She almost believed she could hold on to this rhythm, until the shadows she'd been avoiding finally stepped into daylight. It was early evening, golden light spilling through the kitchen windows, when the doorbell rang. Daniel opened it, expecting a delivery, and froze. A man stood there, unkempt hair, bitter smirk, the kind of presence that curdled the air around him. "Clara," he drawled, leaning to peer past Daniel's shoulder. "So this is where you've been hiding." Daniel blocked the doorway, voice like steel. "You're not welcome here." The man chuckled low. "I'm just here for what she owes me." She ran off with more than a few things. His eyes glinted with accusation, the kind of lie that's meant to wound more than it convinces. Clara appeared at the hallway's edge, face draining of color. Emma, sensing the tension, clutched Clara's hand, confused. Daniel stepped forward, closing the gap until the man was forced backward onto the porch. "You need to leave. Now." His tone carried the authority of someone used to boardrooms, but it carried something else too, an edge sharpened by the thought of his daughter watching. The man's grin faltered, but he spat his parting words anyway. "Careful, CEO. Not every story looks good in the papers." Then he turned, stomping down the path, muttering threats half meant for himself. Daniel closed the door slowly, pulse racing harder than he wanted to admit. Clara stood frozen, Emma still holding her hand. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, shaking her head. "I never wanted him near your world." Daniel looked at her, saw the shame curving her shoulders inward. "That wasn't your fault," he said firmly. But the warning had been delivered. Trouble had a name and a face, and it wasn't done yet. The fallout came faster than either of them expected. The next morning, whispers had already reached the outside. A photo surfaced: Clara in the garden, barefoot, Emma laughing by her side. The caption twisted the image into scandal. CEO shelters mystery woman love story or deception. Daniel read it in silence, the screen glowing cold in his hand. Clara saw his face and knew before he said anything. "It's starting," she murmured, her voice breaking. She packed quickly that night, placing a folded note on the pillow instead of words she couldn't say aloud. "Thank you for the light. I'm sorry for the shadows." Then she slipped out the side door under rain that fell steady and merciless. For the first time in weeks, the house felt hollow. Emma cried when she discovered the empty room, asking questions Daniel couldn't answer without breaking something in himself. He held her close, but his silence said everything. 3 days stretched into 5, and each one dragged Emma deeper into sadness. Her drawing stopped. Her laughter dimmed. She asked the same question over and over. Will she come back? Daniel didn't know. He tried to pour himself into work, into routine, but even the house betrayed him. Clara's sketch still hung on the fridge, her mug sat in the sink. The absence wasn't empty, it was loud. On the 6th day, Daniel left his office early, unable to ignore the knot tightening in his chest. He found himself standing outside the library, hoping for an answer. The librarian, surprised, nodded. "She comes by sometimes. Volunteers with the kids' reading group." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. She also mentioned an arts center in the district. Free classes for children who can't afford them. If you want to find her, that's where she'll be. Daniel thanked her, though the word felt too small for the relief clawing at his ribs. He knew where to go now. He knew this wasn't finished. The arts center wasn't what Daniel expected. Tucked between weathered storefronts, its walls were alive with children's murals, bright suns, crooked houses, stick figures holding hands. Inside, the air smelled of paint and paper, laughter echoing off high ceilings. He found her almost immediately. Clara sat cross-legged on the floor, hair tied back messily, a streak of green paint on her cheek. Around her, a circle of kids giggled as she showed them how to blend colors into something new. She was radiant in a way Daniel hadn't seen before, not fragile, not exhausted, but alive. For a moment, he couldn't move. It hit him how much she belonged here, how much the children leaned into her presence like plants reaching for sunlight. When she finally looked up and saw him, the brush slipped from her hand. The room fell away in her mind, though the children still tugged at her sleeve. She stood slowly, eyes wide, unsure whether to stay or flee. Daniel closed the space between them before hesitation could win. He didn't ask if she was okay, didn't ask why she left. Instead, he pulled a cream folder from his coat and placed it in her trembling hands. "I wanted you to see this," he said, his voice low but steady. Clara opened it cautiously, her breath catching as she scanned the pages. A contract, her name printed clearly beside the title, Healing Hearts Project Illustrator. Beneath it, a description of a children's book series on resilience, grief, and hope. She blinked, looking up in disbelief. "I don't understand." Daniel's gaze softened, though his jaw stayed tight. "We're launching something new, and I need someone who doesn't just draw, but feels it. You're the only person I trust." Clara's throat tightened. She shook her head once. "After everything, the gossip, the rumors, you still." He cut in. "You gave Emma something I never could. You helped her feel her mom again. And you reminded me that kindness isn't weakness." His voice cracked on the last word, and he let it. Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Around them, children kept laughing, chasing brushes and spilling paint. But for that moment, silence grew thick between the two of them. She closed the folder gently, clutching it against her chest as if it might slip away. "This isn't charity?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel shook his head firmly. "No, it's a real job. Earned. Deserved." Clara wanted to argue, to insist she wasn't ready, but her hands shook too much to pretend indifference. A single tear dropped onto the page before she could stop it. She whispered the only word she had. "Thank you." Daniel didn't step closer, didn't reach for her. He knew this wasn't about rescuing her. It was about handing her back the pen to write her own future. Still, something in his chest ached with the need to say what he hadn't yet found the courage to. Weeks passed, and the project took shape faster than Clara expected. Her sketches filled the pages, soft watercolor animals carrying lanterns through storms, children holding hands across broken bridges, families planting seeds where old trees had fallen. Each drawing was infused with the quiet strength she carried, and Daniel knew he'd made the right choice. Emma was her biggest fan, cheering each new illustration, demanding bedtime stories with Clara's drawings as the characters. The house began to feel whole again, laughter stitching together rooms that had sat silent for years. Yet shadows still lingered. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel found Clara on the back porch, sketchbook open on her knees, the night air heavy with unsaid things. "Why do you keep doing this for me?" she asked suddenly, not looking up. "After the mess I brought, after the storm." Daniel leaned against the railing, considering. "Because storms don't erase the sun. They just cover it for a while." She closed her book, staring at him like she wanted to believe, but fear clung stubbornly. The fear proved right. The same man who had shown up at Daniel's door wasn't finished. Late one night, when the street outside was quiet, Clara's phone buzzed again, messages this time, harsher, louder in their cruelty. "You think you can just walk away? You owe me. People are watching you." She silenced it, shoved the phone into a drawer, but the words dug into her skin like glass splinters. She didn't tell Daniel, not yet, not wanting to poison the fragile peace they had built. But the weight showed in her eyes, in the way her laughter stuttered mid-breath, in the way she checked windows twice before drawing the curtains. Daniel noticed. He always noticed. He said nothing, but in his chest the decision was already forming. If the storm came again, he wouldn't let her face it alone. Not this time. The storm arrived louder than either of them imagined. It started with whispers, online articles recycling the same photo of Clara barefoot in the garden, headlines twisting her story into scandal. Billionaire CEO hides homeless lover. Mystery woman invades family life. The comments were cruel, filled with strangers inventing sins she had never committed. Clara tried not to read them, but curiosity and fear dragged her eyes to the words until they blurred. Daniel found her once, sitting on the edge of the guest bed, phone shaking in her hand. "Stop looking," he said quietly, taking the device and slipping it into his pocket. She wanted to protest, but the truth was she felt relief the moment it left her grip. Still, the damage was spreading faster than she could hide from it. It wasn't just gossip. One morning at the library where she'd begun volunteering, the manager pulled her aside, kindness laced with regret. "We love having you here, Clara," he said, "but the board is nervous about the attention. We'll have to let you go." Her breath caught, but she didn't argue. Pride wouldn't let her beg. She left with her sketchpad clutched tight, walking past curious stares that pierced deeper than knives. That night, while Emma slept soundly and Daniel worked late in his office, Clara packed quietly. She left nothing behind except a single envelope on her pillow. "Thank you for showing me light. I'm sorry for the shadows." Then she slipped into the rain, her figure vanishing down the road like she had never been there at all. When Daniel found the note, something inside him cracked. He sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in his hands, the silence pressing like a weight. He thought of the way Clara's laughter had filled the kitchen, the way Emma's joy had doubled whenever she was near, the way her art had breathed color into a home that had long felt gray. He thought of his wife, of years spent wrapped in grief, and how Clara had unknowingly cracked the armor he had built around himself. He realized then how careful he had been, how he had guarded his words when she needed to hear them most. Now she was gone, and his silence had cost him more than any rumor could. Emma noticed too. She asked question after question, each one cutting sharper than the last. "Why didn't Miss Clara say goodbye? Did I do something wrong? Will she come back?" Daniel tried to answer, but the truth was he didn't know. For 3 days she cried, her small shoulders shaking, her drawings abandoned in a pile on the floor. At night she clung to him, whispering, "Not again, Daddy. Not like Mommy." Those words nearly broke him. He promised himself he wouldn't fail her again. He couldn't bring back his wife, but maybe, just maybe, he could fix what he'd let slip through his fingers with Clara. So he went looking. The library manager gave him the clue, an arts center downtown, where Clara taught children how to paint. He drove there without hesitation, his heart pounding like a drum he couldn't quiet. He didn't know what he would say when he saw her. He didn't know if she would even listen, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let the story end with silence. Not for Emma, not for himself, not for the woman who had already written herself into their lives with strokes of color he couldn't erase. The arts center buzzed with the chaos of children paint splattered on tables, laughter echoing through the hall, the smell of markers and glue hanging in the air. Daniel stood at the doorway, searching, until he saw her. Clara knelt on the floor, surrounded by a group of kids, showing them how to mix colors into sunsets. A smear of yellow streaked her cheek, and for a moment he just watched, realizing this was who she truly was, not the woman on the sidewalk, not the figure in the headlines, but someone who gave her light away even when she had none left for herself. She noticed him then, her hands faltering mid-stroke. The room blurred around them, children's voices fading to a hum. She stood slowly, unsure whether to run or face him, but Daniel walked forward first, determination steady in his stride. He handed her a folder, cream-colored, heavy with intent. "This is for you," he said, his voice low but clear. Clara opened it cautiously, her breath catching at the sight. A publishing contract with her name printed at the top. Healing Hearts Series Illustrator. She looked up in disbelief, tears brimming before words could form. "I don't understand," she whispered. Daniel's eyes softened. "It's not charity. It's your work, your gift. You helped Emma see her mother again through your art. You helped me remember how to feel again. Now I want the world to see what only you can create." Her hands trembled as she clutched the folder to her chest, overwhelmed. For the first time in weeks, hope felt heavier than fear. Months passed, and the series blossomed into something extraordinary. Clara's illustrations filled the pages of books that touched thousands of children who had lost parents, families who needed reminders that healing could come in colors and lines. Emma proudly carried the first copy everywhere, introducing Clara as if she had always been part of the family. Daniel watched the two of them together, laughter bubbling between them like it had been waiting all along. The house was no longer quiet. It breathed again, full of life. Yet there was still one thing Daniel hadn't said, one step he hadn't taken. He had waited, not out of fear, but because the moment needed to belong to all of them, not just him. That moment came in an art gallery filled with Clara's work. Her watercolors lined the walls, soft and vibrant, each piece a fragment of her journey. Families wandered, children pointed, and Emma held Clara's hand with a smile too wide to contain. Daniel stepped to the front, his voice carrying over the crowd. "I've given a lot of speeches," he began, "but never one like this. A year ago, I met someone on a sidewalk. She had nothing, but she had light. She didn't just change my daughter's life, she gave mine back." He walked down the stage steps, the room falling silent as he approached Clara. Reaching into his pocket, he knelt on one knee. Gasps rose, cameras clicked, Emma squealed. Daniel opened the velvet box, his eyes steady on hers. "Clara Harper," he said, voice steady, "you saved us. You gave us back laughter, love, and a reason to believe again. Will you marry me? Will you be Emma's mother and my partner in every chapter that comes next?" Clara's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming as the room erupted in stunned silence. She nodded, barely able to speak, her voice breaking on the single word. "Yes." Emma clapped so hard her arms shook, shouting, "Now I have a mommy and daddy forever." The gallery filled with applause, flashes of cameras, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the look on Daniel's face, the way Clara's trembling hands found his, the way Emma wrapped her arms around both of them, sealing the moment into something no headline could ever distort. The wedding was small, held in the backyard where Clara had once knelt to plant flowers with Emma. Wild blooms surrounded them, fairy lights strung through the trees, and when vows were spoken, it wasn't just a promise between two adults, it was a vow to a little girl who had seen hunger and answered with kindness. The first book of the Healing Heart series closed with a simple illustration. 3 figures at a table, brushes in hand, colors spilling across the page. Emma painted a rainbow, Clara added gentle detail, and Daniel's clumsy heart-shaped sketch sat proudly in the middle. Beneath it, in Clara's handwriting, the words, "Sometimes one small heart can change 3 lives forever." And in their story, that little heart had a name, Emma.